Alexander Sterling stood in the marble-floored suite of the St. Regis Hotel, adjusting his platinum cufflinks while Manhattan's skyline stretched beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. At 34, he commanded a tech empire worth $47 billion. But today felt like the poorest man alive. The Armani tuxedo felt like a prison uniform. His reflection stared back, sharp jawline, steel-grey eyes that had intimidated boardrooms across 3 continents, and composure that had built Sterling Industries from a dorm room idea into a global phenomenon. Yet beneath the polished exterior, doubt gnawed at him like acid. "Sir, the car is ready," his assistant Marcus announced from the doorway. Marcus had been with him for 8 years, navigating hostile takeovers and media storms. But nothing had prepared either of them for this moment. 300 guests waited at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, including heads of state, Fortune 500 CEOs, and Hollywood royalty. The wedding of the decade, as Vanity Fair had dubbed it. "Marcus," he said quietly, "what would you do if you knew you were about to make the biggest mistake of your life, but stopping would destroy everyone you care about?" Marcus hesitated. "I'd remember that living a lie destroys more people than telling the truth ever could, sir." Victoria Ashworth sat 3 floors below, surrounded by silk, pearls, and anticipation. Her Vera Wang gown, a masterpiece of French lace that took 6 months to create, hung like art against the mahogany armoire. At 29, she embodied everything Manhattan's elite expected from the future Mrs. Sterling: Harvard MBA, old money pedigree, and a smile that graced charity galas with practiced perfection. Her mother, Eleanor Ashworth, directed stylists and photographers with military precision. The Ashworth textile fortune had suffered recently, and Victoria's marriage represented more than love. It was a merger securing both families' legacies. "Darling, you look radiant," Eleanor gushed. "Alexander is fortunate. The Times called it the wedding of the century." Victoria's reflection gazed back, every detail flawless. She had planned this moment since childhood, yet something felt hollow, like admiring a painting from behind bulletproof glass. "Mother," she said softly, "do you think Alexander and I are truly suited for each other?" Eleanor's smile tightened imperceptibly. "Compatibility is a luxury for people without responsibility. You understand what's at stake." The Gothic architecture soared majestically above them, ancient stones bearing witness to centuries of human drama. Sunlight filtered through magnificent stained glass windows, casting jeweled patterns across polished marble floors where titans of industry sat alongside European nobility. Senator Patricia Morrison occupied the 3rd pew, ensuring political stability for Sterling Industries. Tech mogul David Chen had flown from Singapore, representing partnerships worth billions. Russian oil heiress Katerina Volkov sat with studied elegance, her emerald necklace catching light. Most significant was Victoria's grandmother, Constance Ashworth, 91, sharp as a blade. She had built the Ashworth empire from her father's failing silk business, weathering depression, world wars, and countless upheavals. Her approval carried more weight than any stock rating. "Beautiful ceremony," murmured James Hartford, Sterling Industries board chairman, though Alexander seemed tense at the rehearsal. His wife Margaret nodded thoughtfully. Something about Victoria seemed distant too. Marriage is enormous, especially with such scrutiny. Father McKenna made final preparations while the organist tested keys. Few weddings had carried this weight. 2 dynasties joining, billions at stake, thousands of employees' futures hanging in balance. Alexander descended the private elevator, each floor marking another step toward a future that felt increasingly wrong. The limousine waited outside, bulletproof windows tinted against photographers lining the street like wolves. "The prenuptial agreement was finalized this morning," Marcus reported. "Merger documents are ready for signature after the ceremony." Alexander watched Manhattan blur past, the city where he'd built his empire. He thought of his parents, middle-class educators from Ohio, who had sacrificed everything for his opportunities. "Marcus," he said quietly, "do you ever feel like your life has led to a moment where you choose between what's expected and what's right?" Marcus studied his employer's profile. "Every day, sir. But the moments that define us aren't easy choices. They're the ones requiring real courage." The limousine turned onto Amsterdam Avenue, the cathedral spires rising like stone sentinels. In 20 minutes, Alexander would walk down that aisle surrounded by 300 witnesses and billions in expectations. "This wedding is a mistake," he whispered to the bulletproof glass. As Alexander's limousine approached, Emma Rodriguez, a junior reporter for the New York Observer, crouched behind a stone buttress, hoping to capture moments the official photographers would miss. Emma had investigated Sterling Industries for months, following tips about irregular accounting. Her breakthrough came 3 days earlier when a former Sterling accountant, guilt-ridden and facing legal troubles, provided encrypted files containing evidence of financial crimes, correspondence between Alexander and his supposedly dead brother, medical records from European clinics, and surveillance footage from David Sterling's Swiss hideout. Inside the cathedral, Victoria's cousin Sarah noticed something troubling. Victoria sat unnaturally still, her animated conversation replaced by trance-like composure. More concerning were unopened letters on the dressing table. "Vicky, you haven't touched your letters. Aren't you curious about well-wishes?" Victoria's hand moved protectively toward the stack, then stopped. "Some things are better left unopened today." Sarah had glimpsed one envelope's return address that made her blood run cold. The sender was supposed to be dead, David Sterling, declared dead in a Swiss skiing accident 3 years ago. Through the thin paper, Sarah could make out a plea to stop the wedding because David and Victoria had been secret lovers, and the child Victoria had quietly birthed 2 years ago wasn't from a European fling, but David's son. 6 blocks away, Isabella Martinez sat alone in a coffee shop, watching proceedings on her laptop. At 31, she possessed understated beauty that turned heads without trying. Dark hair catching light like silk, eyes reflecting intelligence and sorrow, and a smile that once made Alexander forget billion-dollar deals. She had worked as his personal architect, designing Sterling Industries headquarters. Their 18-month relationship was conducted in shadows, private dinners, Hampton weekends, quiet moments where his empire's weight fell away, and he was simply Alex, who laughed at her terrible jokes and brought coffee exactly how she liked it. The engagement announcement appeared in the Times on a Tuesday, shattering Isabella's world with stock market casualness. Alexander hadn't called, hadn't explained, just a brief text. "I'm sorry. This was always inevitable." Now, watching live coverage, Isabella observed the man she loved preparing to marry someone else for reasons having nothing to do with love. Her laptop displayed tonight's airline ticket, one way to Barcelona. She'd resigned, sold her apartment, packed 3 suitcases, but her purse contained something that could change everything. A USB drive with original architectural plans revealing Sterling Industries' headquarters' most guarded secret. Behind a false wall in Alexander's office was a safe containing documents proving systematic foreign bribery, violations triggering federal investigations and criminal charges. Isabella had discovered the safe accidentally during construction, but never accessed it. Until 3 days ago, when heartbreak and curiosity overcame ethics, what she found could destroy Alexander's empire, but might free him from expectations forcing this loveless marriage. Chapter 7. The Walk Down the Aisle. The cathedral's doors opened, 300 guests rising in unison as Victoria appeared, a vision in French lace and family diamonds. Her father Charles offered his arm with dignity befitting 4 generations of American industry leadership. Victoria moved with practiced grace, her train trailing like liquid silk. Every step was rehearsed, every smile calculated for photogenic impact. Yet as she passed faces representing American power's pinnacle, strange detachment settled over her like fog. She saw Senator Morrison, whose committee could make or break Sterling's green initiatives. David Chen, whose partnerships were crucial for Asian expansion. Each face represented chess pieces her marriage would enable, but her grandmother's eyes stopped her cold. Constance Ashworth sat in the front pew, her 91-year-old gaze sharp as crystal. In those weathered features, Victoria saw not approval, but something resembling pity. The woman who'd built an empire through determination recognized something others missed. As Victoria reached the altar, Alexander stepped forward. For one heart-stopping moment, their eyes met completely. Not careful public glances, but genuine, unguarded looks, revealing 2 people trapped in unchosen circumstances. "You look beautiful," Alexander murmured, though his voice suggested he was speaking to a stranger. "Thank you," Victoria replied, her words equally hollow despite perfection. Chapter 8. The ceremony begins. Father McKenna raised his arms, the cathedral falling into expectant silence. Centuries of tradition pressed down from vaulted ceilings as he began ancient words, joining countless couples in bonds sacred and secular. "Dearly beloved, we gather today to join Alexander James Sterling and Victoria Elizabeth Ashworth in holy matrimony," the priest intoned, his voice echoing off stones, witnessing industrial dynasties rise and fall. Alexander stood rigidly, outward composure masking internal chaos. The ring in his pocket, 12 carats surrounded by matched sapphires, felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Every face seemed to bore into him, expectations tangible as chains. Victoria's breathing became mechanical, each inhalation carefully controlled. The cathedral's atmosphere felt increasingly suffocating despite its soaring architecture. Her bouquet, white orchids and baby's breath arranged with mathematical precision, trembled almost imperceptibly in her hands. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, but reverently, deliberately, and in accordance with the purposes for which it was instituted by God, Father McKenna continued, unaware that his words were landing like accusations rather than blessings. Throughout the congregation, keen observers noticed subtle signs of distress. Margaret Hartford caught how Alexander's jaw tightened when the priest mentioned divine purpose. Senator Morrison observed Victoria's almost statue-like stillness. David Chen, with an entrepreneur's instinct for reading people, sensed an undercurrent of tension that had nothing to do with normal wedding nerves. Chapter 9. The Vows. Do you, Alexander James Sterling, take Victoria Elizabeth Ashworth to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part? The words hung heavy like incense. Alexander stared into Victoria's eyes, seeing his trapped reflection. Around them, 300 guests leaned forward imperceptibly, collective attention pressing down like atmospheric pressure before storms. Seconds stretched into eternity. Alexander's mouth opened, then closed. In the front pew, his mother Dorothy clutched her husband's hand, remembering the shy boy who built programs in their garage, dreaming of changing the world. Alexander began, his voice catching. The cathedral's acoustics amplified his hesitation, carrying it to every corner. Victoria's eyes widened imperceptibly, genuine emotion flickering across her composed features. "I do," Alexander finally said, words emerging like stones from his throat. Victoria's turn arrived with sunrise inevitability. Her response came smoothly, delivered with polish from childhood training to meet public obligations regardless of private feelings. "I do," she said clearly, betraying nothing of internal turmoil. The ring exchange followed with choreographed precision. Alexander's hands remained steady, placing the magnificent diamond on Victoria's finger, but his touch felt mechanical, a business transaction conducted before cameras. Victoria's placement of his platinum band seemed equally perfunctory. "By the power vested in me by the state of New York," Father McKenna announced triumphantly, "I pronounce you husband and wife." Chapter 10. The revelation, "You may kiss the bride," Father McKenna announced with warm expectation. Alexander and Victoria leaned toward each other with choreographed reluctance. Their lips met in a kiss, feeling more like resignation than passion. Photographers captured the moment, but no camera recorded the hollow emptiness both felt. Polite applause erupted, but sounded muffled to the couple. As they separated, Victoria noticed something new in Alexander's eyes. Not relief or happiness, but something resembling grief. Suddenly, the cathedral's massive doors burst open with resonance, silencing applause instantly. Emma Rodriguez stood in the entrance, press credentials visible but appearance disheveled. In her hands, she clutched a manila folder pulsing with significance. "Stop!" she called out, voice carrying clearly through sudden silence. "This wedding cannot continue!" Security moved toward her, but Emma raised the folder like a shield. "I have documents proving both families have been living lies, making this marriage legally impossible." Gasps rippled through the congregation. Senator Morrison half rose, political instincts recognizing scandal. But Constance Ashworth stood fully, her ancient voice cutting through chaos with surprising strength. "Let her speak," the matriarch commanded, 91 years of authority silencing even security. Emma stepped forward, hands shaking but voice strengthening. "David Sterling didn't die in Switzerland. He's been hiding in Europe for 3 years, while his brother covered embezzlement charges. But more, he and Victoria Ashworth have been lovers, and she bore his child 2 years ago." The cathedral erupted. Victoria swayed as if struck, carefully applied makeup highlighting her pallor. Alexander's face showed shock, understanding, and finally, something resembling relief. "And Alexander Sterling has been in love with someone else for 2 years, someone he gave up only because he felt trapped by family expectations. That someone is Isabella Martinez, the architect who designed Sterling Industries headquarters and has been living in exile in Spain since the engagement was announced." Chapter 11. The truth unveiled. The cathedral fell into stunned silence, the magnitude of revelations leaving even Manhattan's most sophisticated guests momentarily speechless. Alexander and Victoria faced each other at the altar, no longer bride and groom, but two people finally seeing each other clearly for the first time. "This is preposterous," Charles Ashworth bellowed, rising with indignation. "Security, remove this woman." But Constance Ashworth's voice cut through her son's protests like a blade. "Charles, sit down. If there's truth to be told, it's better told now than discovered later." Emma stepped further into the cathedral, folder clutched like armor. "I have bank records showing transfers from Sterling Industries to Swiss accounts, dated after David Sterling's supposed death. I have medical records from a Paris clinic showing Victoria Ashworth gave birth 26 months ago. And I have photographs and correspondence proving Alexander Sterling's relationship with Isabella Martinez continued until 3 months ago." Victoria's composed mask cracked completely. Tears streamed down her face, smearing hours of perfect makeup. "Alex," she whispered, "I'm so sorry. I never wanted any of this." Alexander looked at her with something approaching compassion for the first time since their engagement. "Neither did I, Victoria. Neither did I." The congregation watched in stunned silence as two of Manhattan's most powerful families faced their carefully constructed facades collapse. But it was Margaret Hartford who noticed the most human detail: how both bride and groom seemed to breathe freely for the first time all day. If we're going to have truth, let's have all of it, Alexander said, voice carrying newfound strength. He turned to face the congregation. This wedding is a mistake. Not because Victoria isn't wonderful, but because we're both in love with other people. We've been living lies to satisfy expectations that were never ours. Victoria nodded through tears. I've been trying to be who everyone wanted instead of who I actually am. That's not fair to Alex, my family, or myself. Chapter 12. The Choice. The cathedral stood in absolute silence, 300 guests processing the complete destruction of everything they'd come to witness. Alexander and Victoria faced each other, no longer bride and groom, but two people finally seeing clearly. "What do we do now?" Victoria asked softly. Alexander looked at the congregation, his parents' confused faces, the Ashworths' mortification, business associates calculating expressions, already planning damage control. Then his gaze settled on the cathedral doors, where sunlight streamed like a beacon. "We choose truth over convenience," he said, voice strengthening. "We choose love over obligation. We choose to be who we actually are instead of who everyone expects." He turned to Father McKenna, frozen with uncertainty. "Father, is there a way to undo what just happened?" The priest blinked in confusion. "Well, technically, the ceremony was completed before these revelations. But given circumstances, an annulment could be arranged quickly." Victoria addressed the congregation directly. "I apologize to everyone expecting celebration, but I won't apologize for finally telling the truth." Charles Ashworth stood, face purple with rage. "Victoria Elizabeth Ashworth, if you walk away from this marriage, you walk away from this family." Constance Ashworth answered, ancient voice carrying decades of authority. "Charles, be quiet. The girl is showing more backbone than anyone in this family has demonstrated in years." The matriarch made her way to the altar, cane tapping marble floors. When she reached Victoria, she took her granddaughter's hands. "Child," she said gently, "I built our fortune by making hard choices, not easy ones. Sometimes the bravest thing is admitting when you're wrong and choosing differently." She turned to Alexander with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. "And you, young man, your parents raised you to be honorable. There's more honor in this moment than in a lifetime of comfortable lies." Alexander felt something shift inside him, like tectonic plates settling properly. "I need to find Isabella," he said simply. "I need to go to Barcelona and tell her that I finally chose truth over fear." Chapter 13. New Beginnings. 6 months later, scandal had faded from front pages, replaced by newer dramas. Alexander Sterling sat in a Barcelona cafe, watching Isabella Martinez sketch architectural designs for a community center they were planning together. The $10,000 suit had been replaced by jeans and a simple shirt. The weight of expectations had lifted like morning fog. Sterling Industries had survived, though not without consequences. Alexander had stepped back from daily operations, focusing on philanthropic work. The stock stabilized after initial plunging, and federal bribery investigations were quietly resolved through cooperation and massive penalties. "Do you ever regret it?" Isabella asked, looking up from her sketchpad. "Walking away from all that power?" Alexander considered the question, watching Barcelona's afternoon light play across her features. "I didn't walk away from power. I walked towards something more powerful. The ability to choose my own life." In New York, Victoria had undergone her own transformation. After brief media firestorm, she'd quietly moved to Vermont, running a small organic farm and raising her son, David Sterling's child, away from Manhattan's judgment. David himself had surrendered to authorities, serving shortened sentence in exchange for testimony about corporate financial irregularities. The Ashworth family initially cut ties as threatened, but Constance's influence gradually brought reconciliation. The textile business was restructured under the grandmother's guidance, ultimately emerging stronger. Alexander's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. He opened it to find a photo of Victoria in muddy overalls, grinning beside a prize-winning tomato plant with a 2-year-old boy on her shoulders. The caption read, "Living my actual life. Thank you for having the courage to tell the truth." He showed the message to Isabella, who smiled and returned to sketching. "You know what I think about sometimes? What's that? How different everything would be if you had just said I do and gone through with it. Two people living lies, destroying themselves and everyone around them." Alexander reached across the table and took her hand, feeling calluses from architectural drafting and volunteer construction work. The truth isn't always comfortable, but it's always worth it. Outside the cafe, Barcelona buzzed with life. Real, messy, authentic life, having nothing to do with stock prices or social expectations. Alexander Sterling had traded a $47 billion empire for something infinitely more valuable: the freedom to love without conditions and live without pretense. Sometimes, the most powerful thing a person can do is admit they were wrong and choose a different path. Thank you for following this dramatic journey of courage, truth, and the power of authentic love. Stories like Alexander and Victoria's remind us that sometimes the bravest choice we can make is to stop living the life others expect and start living the life that's truly ours. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Where are you watching from, and have you ever had to choose between expectations and authenticity? Your stories and perspectives from around the world always inspire us to keep sharing tales of human courage and transformation.